And now, the best 60-ish seconds of your week. It's the third Saturday of May, and the beauty of spring is all around us. College graduation's mostly over, some concluding today, and it's Armed Services Day, or Armed Forces Day, if you prefer, the day when we honor those men and women who serve our nation. All 6 branches of the U.S. military, including the newly formed Space Force, are included in that honoring. And this is not Memorial Day, which happens a couple of weeks from now, where we honor those who gave the last full measure of devotion to their country and its service, or Veterans Day, which is the old Armistice Day on November 11th, when we honor those who previously served. This is for those who currently serve all of us and defend our liberties and our way of life. And of course, you know I've got to make one little aside about the NBA playoffs, although I frankly have given up on the NBA because of all the politics and nonsense that has crept into it. But the Sixers and the Celtics, one of the iconic battles of NBA basketball, bringing me troubled memories of my childhood, although the Sixers did take him in the 66-67 season with Wilt Chamberlain, and again with Billy Cunningham's squad, where they beat the Celtics 4 straight in the Garden, and you heard that tumultuous cheer coming out of the rafters from Boston faithful saying, "Beat LA, beat LA." I hope that Philadelphia is now encouraging the Boston Celtics to go deep into the NBA playoffs and maybe win it all. But I got to tell you, the Sixers fell as flat as I've ever seen a bad souffle pancake. The third quarter of Game 7 was an absolute disaster. The Sixers managing only 10 points, three of them on a last-minute three-pointer. They had been outscored 33-7 up until that point. They tied up the game just minutes or seconds into the third quarter when Tobias Harris hit a three-pointer, tied it up at 55, and then they went on that skate where they didn't score at all. Just awful. They should have wrapped it up in Game 6 at home. They managed to mess that up, had to go to Game 7 and got flattened by Jason Tatum, who scored 51, breaking Sam Jones' record for a 7th game appearance. And the rest, as they say, is history. It's not as bad quite as Havlicek stole the ball, but for Philly fans, pretty bad. And a good thing came out of that. The Sixers fired Doc Rivers just a day or two later. And here's an item you may not, sadly, have heard that much about, but I hope every American will hear much more about, because the media, frankly, is trying to block it out. They want to focus on other things other than the John Durham report, which was finally released this week. Long awaited, because he laid out in pretty significant detail what happened in the 2016 campaign with the FBI going after Donald Trump on the so-called Russian collusion, which we now know was in fact a hoax, but much worse than that, because it was a hoax propagated by an FBI, weaponized and politicized to the point where there were people in there at the highest levels saying, in effect, we're going to get Donald Trump. The conversations between Lisa Page and Peter Strzok and Andrew McCabe clearly set forth an incredible bias against the Trump campaign and in favor of the Hillary Clinton campaign, who was feeding them disinformation, which they then spun into an investigation, which was then spun by the media into disinformation to the American people, and led incredibly to significant cynicism on the part of a lot of Americans about our institutions once the facts began to roll out. Now, this is the same FBI that when I was a kid was the subject of an Ephraim Zimbalist Jr. television show where they were lauded as the great G-men and the people that were going to protect us and our freedoms. And it comes to bear now that exactly the opposite was true in 2016. This is an opportunity for America to really begin to clean up a mess, because democracy itself rests on this kind of stuff not ever being allowed to happen again. And we had a couple of primary elections this week. In my home state of Pennsylvania, in the city of Philadelphia, Sherelle Parker won the Democrat nomination for mayor there, pretty much tantamount to election in the fall. And she was not the progressive darling in Philadelphia. Helen Gim and a couple of others were more so, although most of the Democrats there were, by statewide standards anymore, relatively moderate, certainly further to the center than the incumbent mayor, Jim Kenney, who has just been a total and complete disaster for that city. Coupled with Larry Krasner, the Soros-backed DA, they've made that place into a shambles. Hopefully, Sherelle Parker America can begin to bring it back. She actually talked about increasing police protection and the police force in Philadelphia in order to combat crime. Imagine that. Think about that being used in Chicago, for example. But further to the west, a socialist, part of the Democrat Socialist Alliance there in Pittsburgh, won for the Democratic nomination for Allegheny County. Now, for those who don't live in Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh's only a part of Allegheny County, whereas Philadelphia is both a city and a county in and of itself. But Allegheny County has now elected, at least nominated, a Democratic county executive who is from the far, 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 far left of the Democrat Party. It's not the old party of JFK or Hubert Humphrey or Scoop Jackson or any of those names that you can conjure up from years past. The Republicans there have a real opportunity because I think organized labor is going to see this as a real wake-up call, and a lot of the old-line Democrats will join with Republicans in trying to block yet another socialist there. So, two ends of the state, kind of different results. And in Kentucky, the Attorney General, Daniel Cameron, won the Republican nomination for governor to face Andy Beshear, the only Democrat to hold statewide office in the Bluegrass state. So that sets up a real battle royale for the fall. And Cameron had to use all of his money, essentially, to win the primary. So he needs campaign contributions. I can't remember. I think it's Cameron for Kentucky, if I remember correctly. See if he can go there and make a contribution to that really, really important precursor to the 2024 election. It is going to be a bellwether and a real opportunity for a Republican gain in a key state. Daniel Cameron, the African-American Attorney General of Kentucky, the Republican nominee against Andy Beshear, the current Democrat governor of Kentucky. And speaking of Kentucky, the only horse from the Kentucky Derby a couple of weeks ago entered in today's Preakness, at least at the time of this taping, is Mage, who won the Kentucky Derby and therefore has a shot at the Triple Crown this year, something that didn't happen last year because the winner of the Derby didn't enter in the Preakness. It'll be an exciting race, a small field, 8 horses at the time we're taping this, and sadly, Angel of Empire, rather, Pennsylvania favorite, isn't in the field, but we'll have to wait and see what happens at the Belmont. Because for now, that is the best 60-ish seconds of your week.